The space station Orbital Nexus 7 was alive with color and sound. Alien voices, mixed in strange harmonies, echoing across metallic corridors. Creatures of every shape and size bustled about, some with multiple limbs, others with translucent skin, and a few with wings fluttering against the artificial gravity. In the middle of it all, humans were rare. Among these aliens, they were always noticed, always curious. Kieran moved carefully through the busy corridor, his boots clanging lightly against the metal floor. He was a human engineer, assigned to maintain the station's research facilities. Unlike the aliens who took the bustling corridors for granted, Kieran's eyes never stopped moving, absorbing everything around him. He had been fascinated by alien life since he was a child, but it was the humans' rarity here that made him feel special. And today, as always, his gaze lingered on one particular figure, Ala. Ala was an alien xenobiologist, known for her intelligence and precision. She had 4 arms, each moving gracefully as she adjusted instruments and recorded data. Her skin shimmered faintly under the station lights, shifting color with her mood. Kieran had seen her work many times from a distance, but every time he watched, it felt like discovering something new. Why did he keep staring at her? Even he didn't fully understand. There was admiration, yes. But there was also something deeper, something he didn't yet have the courage to name. Human, a voice called sharply. Kieran jerked his head toward it, catching Ayla's amber eyes fixed on him. She was standing near a console, her 4 hands folded neatly behind her back. "Why do you keep staring at me?" Kieran froze, his cheeks warming. I'm not staring," he mumbled, but he knew she didn't believe him. No alien had ever ignored his curiosity before. Usually they found humans peculiar, amusing, or inferior. But Ayla, she seemed different. She seemed to notice. Ayla raised an eyebrow where the alien equivalent of one hand tilted her head. "Humans are strange," she said simply, then returned to her work. Kieran let out a quiet sigh and moved past her, pretending to check a nearby panel. He could feel her eyes on him, though. Even when she didn't look directly, he sensed her attention. It was frustrating and thrilling at the same time. The research lab was unlike anything Kieran had ever worked in. Strange alien instruments hummed and clicked. Containers held samples of glowing liquids, bizarre plants, and creatures that moved with a fluid grace. Ala was the master of this domain. She handled her work with focus, never distracted, never hurried. And Kieran, despite his shyness, couldn't help but admire the way she moved. His first real interaction with her came unexpectedly. A loud alarm sounded across the lab, red lights flashing as one of Ayla's experimental devices malfunctioned. Sparks flew from a console, and a cloud of strange vapor began filling the room. "Get out," Ayla shouted, her voice firm, commanding, but panic edged into it. Kieran didn't move. His instincts took over. He knew enough about the station's emergency systems to respond. He ran to the control panel and quickly rerouted power, cutting the malfunctioning device off before the vapor could spread further. The alarm stopped and the lights returned to normal. Ala's 4 hands flew to the controls, checking her samples. "You human?" she said, her tone incredulous. "You saved my research," Kieran shrugged, trying to appear casual. "I just noticed the power fluctuations. You look like you could use a hand." Ala studied him closely, her eyes narrowing. Humans were curious creatures, unpredictable in ways that were both fascinating and frustrating. Most aliens would panic, hide, or simply follow protocol, but this human had acted differently. Deliberately, quickly, and successfully. Ala began, then paused, choosing her words carefully. "Humans are strange," Kieran chuckled softly. "I think aliens are stranger," he replied. Ala blinked, and for a moment, there was something almost like amusement in her eyes. Then she turned back to her instruments, her attention returning to her work. But Kieran noticed the small shift in her expression, a recognition that perhaps humans weren't entirely helpless. From that moment, Kieran's admiration for her grew, but so did his nervousness. He wanted to speak to her, to understand her, to connect, but he had to respect her space. She was focused, brilliant and untouchable in a way. The next few days passed in a blur of maintenance work and stolen glances. Kieran kept close to her lab, always ready to help, always watching from a distance. Ala, for her part, seemed indifferent. But Kieran noticed subtle changes. She would pause and look up, sometimes catching him staring. When their eyes met, she didn't look away immediately anymore. One afternoon, while recalibrating a series of alien instruments, Ala spoke without warning. "You follow me?" she said. Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried the weight of observation. "Why?" Kieran swallowed. I want to learn," he said honestly. "From you, from your work, from the way you understand things others don't." Ella tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. Most humans didn't speak like this. They were either bold and foolish or quiet and timid. Kieran was a rare mix of curiosity and humility, and she had never encountered such a combination before. "You are persistent," she said slowly. "Humans are persistent. It is unusual." Kieran smiled faintly, feeling a small victory. Maybe persistence is a human trait. "I think it helps us notice things others miss." Ayla studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching. Then she returned to her instruments, her hands moving with precise grace. "Very well," she said. "Observe, but do not interfere. Most humans would ruin this lab in a day." Kieran nodded, hiding his relief. "I won't interfere," he promised. That evening, as the station settled into its quiet cycle, Kieran walked back to his quarters. He paused to look at Ayla's lab one last time. The soft glow of alien instruments reflected in the polished floor. And he could see her working, focused, entirely herself. His heart raced. He didn't fully understand why he felt so drawn to her. Admiration was part of it, certainly, but it went deeper. He respected her mind, her skill, her uniqueness. And somewhere, tucked quietly beneath that respect, was something else, something he had not yet named, but that made him nervous and excited all at once. Humans were rare here, but so was Ala, and for reasons he didn't fully understand, he felt that watching her, learning from her, being near her, was where he belonged. Little did he know, Ayla had begun noticing him more than she realized. Humans were strange, she often thought. But perhaps this human was different. Perhaps he saw the world in ways she could not. Perhaps slowly she was beginning to feel something entirely new, a fascination, a respect, maybe even curiosity about the human who kept staring at her. And so, life on Orbital Nexus 7 continued. Amid the bustling aliens, flashing lights, and worry machines, a human engineer found himself captivated by an alien scientist, and an alien scientist found herself puzzled by a human whose quiet determination and curious eyes were impossible to ignore. Kieran knew this was only the beginning. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt certain of one thing. He had to stay near her. He had to learn, observe, and perhaps in time let her know the truth of why he kept staring. For now he watched from afar, patient, careful, and hopeful, because humans, after all, had a way of surprising everyone, even themselves. The transport shuttle hummed as it descended toward the alien planet Veralia 3. Outside the window, violet clouds swirled across the sky, and jagged mountain peaks rose sharply from the ground. The planet's surface was alive with strange patterns, rivers of glowing liquid, forests of crystalline trees, and creatures that shimmered in colors no human eye had names for. Kieran adjusted his harness in the shuttle, excitement and nerves coiling in his chest. This was his first field mission outside the station, and he was here to assist Ala. She had invited him more, perhaps tolerated him on this journey because the terrain would be dangerous, and she needed a human perspective on some of the unpredictable environmental patterns. Ayla sat opposite him, her forearms folded neatly, her amber eyes scanning the view. She didn't speak, but Kieran could sense her attention. Every so often, her gaze flicked toward him, and he felt his chest tighten. "You are quiet," she said finally, her tone neutral but carrying a subtle weight of observation. "I like to observe first," Kieran replied. "It helps me understand things better." Allah's eyes narrowed. Humans are unusual. Most would speak constantly, asking questions that make no sense. You wait and watch. Perhaps it is useful, Kieran smiled faintly. Maybe humans are patient. We learn by noticing. Allah gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod and returned to studying the swirling landscape below. When the shuttle landed, the ramp extended and the pair stepped onto the rocky surface. Kieran marveled at the terrain immediately. The ground was rough and crystalline, with occasional patches of soft, bioluminescent moss that glowed under their feet. Strange creatures moved quickly between the rocks, some skittering, others floating. This planet is unpredictable, Kieran said. The patterns in the terrain change constantly. Even the moss seems alive. Allah didn't answer at first. She crouched to examine a cluster of glowing plants, touching them with delicate precision. Veralia 3 is dangerous, she said finally. It is not forgiving of mistakes. Every misstep could destroy researcher life. Kieran's eyes flicked over the landscape, studying the patterns instinctively. His mind worked differently than most aliens. He noticed faint traces of movement in the moss, subtle shifts in color in the rocks, and the way the wind blew through the crystalline trees. Most aliens relied on data and instruments alone, but humans well. Humans noticed small details others overlooked. They began their expedition carefully. Ayla leading, Kieran following, but always observing. Hours passed, and Kieran found himself quietly pointing out subtle changes in the terrain. At first, Allah dismissed them. Aliens relied on experience and instinct. Humans were unpredictable and sometimes unreliable. But then a sudden tremor shook the ground. A section of the moss field they were crossing began collapsing into a hidden crevice. Ayla froze. Her knowledge of the planet didn't prepare her for this sudden shift. Kieran didn't hesitate. He grabbed a nearby vine-like plant, anchoring himself, then extended his hand toward her. Step here. Follow my lead, he shouted. Allah blinked, surprised by his sudden decisiveness. She trusted instruments and data, not instinctive moves. But in that moment, she had no choice. She followed his directions, each step precise, and together they leaped across the unstable ground. When they reached safe terrain, Isla's forehands gripped a nearby rock. Her amber eyes were wide not with anger, but with a mix of astonishment and something she refused to name. You predicted it, she said softly. You saw what I did not. Kieran shrugged. Humans notice patterns differently. We see connections others miss. It helps us survive. Allah said nothing more. But Kieran caught the faintest trace of a smile. It was subtle, but it changed everything. The sun, or what passed for the sun on Veralia 3, was setting, casting long purple shadows across the jagged rocks. Kieran and Allah made camp near a crystalline grove. The glowing trees cast soft light, illuminating the strange moss and shimmering creatures that moved silently. Kieran set up their temporary shelter. Using knowledge from his training on the station, Ayla watched silently, her curiosity growing. She had never seen a human adapt so quickly to an alien environment, let alone do it calmly. That human trait, patience, observation. It is remarkable, she muttered under her breath, though Kieran caught it. He smiled awkwardly. You mean me? Allah's eyes widened slightly, then she looked away. I did not mean to speak aloud, she said, but her tone was lighter than before. Night fell quickly on Veralia 3, bringing with it a chill that seeped into their shelter. Strange sounds echoed through the crystalline trees, creatures communicating in clicks and hums. Kieran lay on his sleeping pad, thinking about the day. He had survived, helped her, and somehow gotten her attention. Allah was quiet, tending to the samples they had collected. Kieran could see her expression in the dim light. Her usual stoic demeanor was softened, her amber eyes occasionally lifting to glance at him. She didn't speak, but the small changes in her posture told him she was observing him just as intently as he observed her. The next morning, their exploration continued. Kieran's human intuition became crucial as they moved deeper into the alien forest. He noticed faint tracks on the crystalline rocks, patterns in the moss, and subtle shifts in the air currents. These observations allowed them to avoid dangerous terrain and navigate areas. Ayla's instruments had flagged as too unstable. Ayla, to her own surprise, began to rely on him not entirely, but enough to acknowledge his presence as more than a distraction. "You are helpful," she said during a brief rest. "I underestimated humans." Kieran laughed softly. "Most aliens do." She raised an eyebrow. What approximated one and stared at him. "And why is that?" "Because we see things differently," Kieran replied simply. "We notice details, patterns, emotions, things others might ignore." Ala was silent for a long moment, studying him. "Emotions," she repeated almost skeptically. "Humans allow feelings to influence reasoning?" "Sometimes," Kieran admitted, "but not always. Sometimes it's our greatest strength." A sudden roar interrupted them. A large quadrupedal creature, shimmering with crystalline scales, appeared on a nearby ridge. Its eyes glowed faintly as it sniffed the air. Noticing their presence, Allah's hands moved quickly to prepare defensive measures, but Kieran stepped forward. "Wait," he said. "It's curious, not hostile." Allah froze. "How do you know?" Kieran observed the creature's posture, the flick of its tail, the way it shifted its weight. "It's investigating, not attacking. If we move slowly and show no threat, it will pass." A tense moment followed. The creature lowered its head, sniffed, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Allah's 4 hands relaxed. She looked at Kieran with something between astonishment and admiration. "You humans. You act differently. Unpredictable. Effective." Kieran smiled, though his heart raced. "We survive by noticing what others don't." By the time they returned to their shuttle, night had fallen again. Allah was quiet, thoughtful. She had begun to see Kieran not just as a curious human, but as someone remarkably being capable of ingenuity. Calm, under pressure, and understanding subtle details that even she, with her advanced knowledge, sometimes missed. As they prepared to leave the planet, Kieran glanced at her. "You noticed I was watching you?" he said softly. Ayla's amber eyes met his. Perhaps she admitted, "But I did not think humans could be so reliable." Kieran's chest tightened. "I'm glad I could help," he said quietly. Ayla looked away, returning her attention to the shuttle's instruments. But Kieran could sense the change. She had begun to see him as more than a human engineer. She had begun to see him as someone capable of brilliance, courage, and unexpected insight. As the shuttle lifted off Aurelia 3, Kieran stared out the window, the glowing planet shrinking below them. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt closer than ever to Elena, just as a colleague, but as someone he cared for deeply. And somewhere, deep inside, he hoped she would one day realize the truth of why he had always stared at her. Humans were rare, fragile in some ways, but extraordinary in others. And Kieran, despite his quiet demeanor, had proven that sometimes the human way, observation, intuition, patience was the difference between survival and failure. Ayla, sitting across from him, didn't speak, but Kieran could feel her thoughts, her curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, a tiny spark of something more. And so, the bond between the human and the alien scientist deepened it, through words, but through shared experience, trust, and the quiet realization that sometimes the smallest details reveal the greatest truths. The space station orbital Nexus 7 was quieter than usual. Most of the aliens had retreated to their quarters or research labs, and the corridors echoed with the soft hum of machinery. Kieran walked carefully, his mind still buzzing from the Veralia 3 mission. He had learned so much about the planetand, about Ayla. He thought of her amber eyes, the way her hands moved with precise grace, and the rare moments when he thought he saw something like curiosity or even amusement flicker across her face. But today, the quiet of the station was broken by a sudden alarm. Red lights flashed across the corridors, and a voice echoed through the intercom. "Warning. Hull breach detected in Sector 12. Evacuate immediately." Kieran's heart raced. Hull breaches were dangerous. Decompression could be fatal in seconds. Without thinking, He sprinted towards Sector 12 as he ran. He saw Ala in the distance, her forearms moving quickly to stabilize the breach. A panel had been damaged, and the air pressure was dropping. "Kieran," she shouted, her voice sharp but controlled. "Get the emergency tools. We don't have much time." Kieran didn't hesitate. He grabbed a portable repair kit and ran to her side. "I'm here," he called. Together, they assessed the damage. Kieran noticed the subtle patterns in the failing system, teeny signs of pressure loss that most aliens would overlook. He quickly adjusted the valves, rerouted power, and sealed critical sections to prevent the breach from spreading. Ayla worked alongside him, her hands moving with precision, but Kieran realized something important. His human intuition was giving them an edge. He could anticipate how the system would react, something even Ayla's advanced instruments couldn't predict. "Hold that panel steady," he shouted. With a coordinated effort, they managed to stabilize the breach. The alarm faded, and the red lights dimmed. Ala exhaled sharply, her hands relaxing for the first time since the alarm. "You humans," she said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "You act differently. You think differently. It saves lives." Kieran wiped sweat from his brow, his chest heaving. "It's what we do," he said simply. "We notice. We adapt. We survive." Alice stared at him for a long moment. She had always respected humans for their unpredictability, but now she saw something deeper. He wasn't just clever. He was brave, patient, and completely reliable under pressure. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that humans could be extraordinary, not just in survival, but in thought, emotion, and action. After the emergency was resolved, the station announced that all systems were secure. The aliens returned to their routines, but Ayla lingered near the repair site. She turned to Kieran, her amber eyes softening in a way she had never allowed herself to show before. "Kieran," she began, then paused. "Why do you keep watching me?" Kieran's heart leaped. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, but now, standing before her, words seemed small. He took a deep breath. "Because I admire you," he said quietly. "I admire your mind, your skill, everything you do. I wanted to understand you, to learn from you, and maybe I care about you more than I should." Ala blinked, her four hands folding together as she processed his words. She had always known humans could feel, but she had never realized how deeply or how courageously they could express it. She looked at him, studying his expression, his sincerity, the honesty in his amber brown eyes. Humans are strange," she said finally. "You risk yourself, you act without fear, and yet you speak your truth openly even when it is dangerous." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I have underestimated you." Kieran smiled softly. "That's okay. Most do, but I think sometimes humans see things differently. And maybe sometimes we feel things others don't expect." Ayla's gaze softened further. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the quiet bond that had been forming between them through shared experiences, trust, and the human's patient observation. She realized she was no longer annoyed by his stares. She was intrigued. She wanted to understand him, just as he had wanted to understand her. The two of them spent the next few hours repairing minor damage from the hull breach. Their hands occasionally brushed against each other while adjusting tools or recalibrating panels. Each touch was electric, though neither admitted it aloud. Kieran felt his heart race, and Ayla's amber eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. Finally, they stepped out onto the observation deck overlooking the station's view of space. Stars stretched across the dark void, glittering like scattered diamonds. Planets rotated silently, and distant ships traced arcs of light across the cosmos. Kieran looked at Ayla. "I'm glad we're here," he said softly. Together, Ala studied him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to speak with warmth. "I am, too. Humans are remarkable. Perhaps I see now that there is more to you than I realized." Kieran's heart swelled. "You mean You're not annoyed by me anymore? Ala tilted her head, a small smile forming on her lips. Annoyed? No, perhaps. I am curious. And perhaps I care as well. The words made Kieran's chest tighten. He had waited for this, hoped for it, but hearing it aloud was more powerful than he had imagined. He stepped closer, careful not to overwhelm her, and said quietly, I love you, Ayla. I have for a long time. Ayla's 4 hands hovered, then slowly reached for him. She didn't pull away. She had always known humans could feel, but the depth of his emotions surprised her. It was honest, pure, and fearless. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the connection they had formed, a bond built on trust, understanding, and admiration. You love me? She whispered, almost in disbelief. Yes, Kieran said softly. I do, and I've tried to show it in my own way. By helping you, by watching, by being near you. Even when I was afraid you might not feel the same. Ayla's amber eyes glistened under the station lights. I do not know what this means for us yet, she admitted. But I am willing to learn. From you, about humans. Kieran smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. We'll learn together, he said. They stood there for a long time, looking out at the stars. The crisis had passed, but something greater had begun, the understanding that humans, with all their curiosity, courage, and emotional depth, could inspire even the most logical of beings to see the universe differently. Over the following days, Kieran and Ayla continued to work together, their bond growing stronger. Kieran's human ingenuity continued to impress her, but now she noticed the small ways he cared, the way he adjusted her equipment before she could, the quiet gestures of thoughtfulness, and the way he simply stayed close, patient and observant. Ayla, in turn, began to respond in subtle ways, offering guidance, sharing rare smiles, and allowing herself to watch him in return. The once aloof scientist was now quietly fascinated by the human who had risked everything. Not for glory, but because he cared. One evening, as the station glimmered in the distance of space, Ayla finally spoke the words she had kept from herself. Kieran, I like having you near. Humans are unpredictable, but you are extraordinary. Kieran's heart soared. I've always thought the same about you, he said, his voice soft but firm. In that quiet moment, amid the stars and humming machinery, a human and an alien shared an understanding deeper than words. Humans were rare, fragile in some ways, but remarkable in others. And Kieran had shown Ayla just how extraordinary they could be, not through strength or speed or alien technology, but through courage, ingenuity, patience, and the depth of feeling that made humans unique. And so, the story ended not with a grand battle or an interstellar war, but with a quiet, profound realization: humans, despite their apparent fragility, had something the universe could not ignore: their curiosity, bravery, and capacity for love. Ayla looked at Kieran once more, her amber eyes reflecting the distant stars. Perhaps humans are worth understanding after all, she whispered. Kieran smiled, reaching out to take her hands in his. We'll figure it out. Together, he said, and under the endless expanse of space. To beings different in every way, yet united by admiration, courage, and love, began a new chapter. One where humans were not just rare observers of the cosmos, but remarkable, capable, and, above all, unforgettable.